Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on our journey and discussion through the recent releases made by the Criterion collection during this year of 2020. And today I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on that film which is designated spy number 1057. This is a film from 1999. The director is Jim Jarmusch. The name of the film is Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. This is the film from 1999, starring Forest Whitaker, and from the great cinematic mind that is Jim Jarmusch. This is, of course, Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. If we were to try, I suppose, to describe this film at its very core or essence, I suppose we could say that it is a film focusing in on a hitman or assassin played by Forest Whitaker and his relations with a particular member of a group or faction of the Italian mafia, and how their relationship, and in particular certain circumstances involving a particular job or jobs, lead to this rift between the gangsters on the one hand and this lone hitman on the other, causing or setting the scene for some confrontations and clashes between the two sides, as it were, leading to a sort of ultimate showdown. So that is, I think, in essence, the core of the narrative story. But as we know from, for those of us who know this film, and of course those of us who know the works of Jarmusch, this also is a film that operates on different levels, related, of course, to such narrative. Yes, that is true, but it operates on, I think, a multitude of levels, thus creating this great example of Jarmusch's cinema at work in this dynamic fashion that is Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. So, for example, the way that the film focuses in on characters and character relationships and quirks and idiosyncratic details of everyday living is, this is part of the reason why, or this is one of the reasons, one of the main reasons why this film has such a strong appeal. Not only does the film set up these interesting characters with Ghost Dog at the center, but it sets them up in a way that allows us to explore the world through their eyes, or to experience moment to moment with them, and to see how they react, and to let the camera linger on their reactions, to let them live and breathe in the world and the environment that Jim Jarmusch has created for them. So I think that leads to these wonderful moments of, dare I say it, serenity or calm that is focused in, or that are focused in on the nature of the characters and giving us, the viewers, the opportunity to get to know them. And in that way, it creates this wonderful paradoxical sense of various blends of style. Because, as I was trying to indicate before, the story, the plot involves a hitman and gangsters, and this hitman adheres to the code of the samurai, or the warrior spirit, which I think, and it also involves a lot of set pieces of action and confrontation. So there is a sense of suspense or action involved, of course. But at the same time, there are moments of serenity that are devoted to, as I say, a further examination of character trait or character idiosyncratic traits and the like. Therefore, this mix of confrontation and calm, this mix of serenity and action, I think is one of the things that works so well. There's a dynamism at play between those two blends, or those two tones, if you will. I think that's one of the reasons why it becomes such a compelling watch, because of the wealth of information that's being presented, and also the way in which it is presenting it. It's this serene calm, which I think is, in a subtle way, a sort of cinematic or maybe cinematic form of trying to be representative or emblematic of the type of philosophy that Ghost Dog himself seems to be adhering to, in terms of this strict adherence to samurai spirit or philosophy as portrayed or as embodied by his understanding and his exposure to Hagakure. So there is this interesting sense of serenity and calm mixed in with notions of thematic or narrative action scenes and suspense, which I think is therefore in keeping, in, I say, a very meta or subtle way, with the spirit and outlook of Ghost Dog, the character himself. So I think that's an interesting parallel right there, thus, as I say, creating the sense of dynamism, propelling the film forward. There's also this great focus on notions of communication and culture. Now, communication is one of the key aspects of this film. Communication between characters, or miscommunications, or lack of communication, but different forms of communication as well, and how this communication is expressed by characters in words or in writings or in a sort of spiritual way. And we see various permutations or combinations of character throughout the film, leading to this notion of explorations of various forms of communication. And this can also be through song, it can be through lyric, it can be through pigeon carrier, it can be through characters that have that are speaking in different languages, and it can be also through silence and action, and it can be through the idea of shared experience. And this is also an interesting segue into another reason why I think this film is great, is that this idea of shared experience is expressed through the film's focus, for example, on literature and books and reading, and how characters can bond because of, let's say, a book that they've read. And I like this focus because it means that we can have shared experiences among a vast array of characters, thus leading to this network, even though ultimately maybe the characters are antithetical to each other, or maybe they otherwise don't have a spiritual connection. Regardless of that, or depending on how their various stories turn out by the end of the film, at the very same time we have this idea of shared experience through things like literature and music and the like. That also leads to the notion of, I think very nicely, of the notion of points of culture, and how points of culture can transcend certain issues of localization, and transcend it in a way to thus make them universal points, and thus points that can be accessible to all. Now, when I say these ideas of culture, I think this film, Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, presents various aspects of different cultures and societies and groups so well. And so, of course, we have Ghost Dog himself, and not just him, but also the community that he is in, not just the people that are directly involved with the plot involving the gangsters, but also the people that are there in the community, that are neighbors to him, or that the people that he sees on a daily basis and knows, etc. And so, and this, I think, is expressed so well, not just in the various details that we can see in the frame, but also in the sounds that we can hear, in the music that we can hear, and also in the atmosphere that is captured so well by Jarmusch, and also by the performances. And so I think this aspect of culture as captured by on cinema is very important, because we also see these points carried over into other cultures or groups that are represented in the film. So I think one of the very striking examples is how music how rap music is engaged with by various people, including members of the mafia or the gangsters, which in turn creates this interesting dynamic, the sense of universality, if you will, of certain cultural points, which I think makes for a really grand statement, if you will. This grand statement is also exemplified by how, quote-unquote, Eastern references are employed by the film in this way. So it contextualizes it, but also it recognizes the universality of these Eastern elements at the same time. So, for example, of course, the hagakure, and for example, how the notion of the samurai code seems to be embodied in the daily life of this very enigmatic and spiritual character, and it becomes a bold principle that is adhered to the very end, or these principles are adhered to the very end. Also, this idea of literature and the code. This is so interesting because what this does is it's taking these seemingly localized aspects of culture that is outside of this world, namely Japan or ancient Japan, which is outside of the world in terms of geography and also temporally, but it's using them and adopting them and engaging with them in a way that makes them, I think, very universal and accessible on the one hand. Also, it creates this wonderful point of creating the discussion or notion of tradition and carrying on traditions, and how we as people, I think, engage with tradition and the like. And I think that as an example and symbol, but also as a broader statement of the universality of various points of different culture coming together and being able to be, for lack of a better phrase, coming together and being able to be one, I think is a very bold and quite a powerful statement in cinema. And it's made in this thoroughly entertaining and captivating way with these various interesting characters at play. Of course, at the center, we have this most enigmatic and most captivating and quite alluring and very powerful character in the form of Ghost Dog, which is played by the great Forrest Whitaker. So these and other reasons are why this film is so great. Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai. I should say also, on a personal note, I remember when this film was first released in theaters many years ago, I had the great honor of being able to go to a local movie theater at the time and watch the film, Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai. It was a fairly packed crowd. It wasn't at full capacity, but there were some people there. So, and people were really into the film. Especially there are some moments of action and some a blend of music and dynamism on screen. And some people were cheering and clapping and going along with the film. And ever since then, the film has this life, this resonance, this following that is well-deserved, because it is such a captivating work that is, as I say, a blend of different tones and styles that create this brilliant, enigmatic, and spiritual sense of Jarmusch and cinema. So this is Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai. Now, when it comes to the Criterion Collection release, which is right here, again, at spine number 1057, which is purported to be based on a new 4K digital restoration, you are getting a packed release. And the film looks great, it sounds great, and it's packed with a lot of supplements and other information like that, including the booklet, and not just that as well, and I'll get to this in a second. So you are getting, I think, a really great presentation of this work, and another film by Jim Jarmusch in the Criterion Collection, because as we know, there are, of course, a number of other films by Jarmusch in the collection. So more Jarmusch films, I think, the happier we all are as film fans. But here is Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, in the Criterion Collection. Speaking of the supplements, let me say that there are a lot. The first is a Q&A, question and answer, with Jim Jarmusch. And this is approximately 1 hour and 24 minutes. It's so long, it's great, it's fantastic. What this is the director Jim Jarmusch is answering questions received from fans. And the questions were sent in, gathered, I assume, or sent into Criterion, and thus giving Jim Jarmusch the opportunity to answer as many as possible in this format. It's an audio recording style, so we don't get an actual visual image of Jim Jarmusch answering the questions, but we get his voice. And it's nice, too, because it's indexed. It's divided up into these chapters, and so you can skip ahead to a particular chapter and listen to a specific question and his answer. And the questions can be very specific and very detailed about the film, going into a wide variety of topics, from the music to performance to influence, cinematic influence and literary influences, samurai, swordsmanship, bushido, and other martial arts, and other Jim Jarmusch films, and also other personality questions and the like. So it is filled with a lot of great detailed information from Jarmusch himself. So well worth it. It's a great kind of tradition, if you will, that Criterion has created with Jarmusch works. So it's lovely to have this kind of supplement here for Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. Next, we have a 29-minute interview or discussion between Michael Gillespie and Forrest Whitaker and Isaac de Bancolet. And these three talk about Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. And of course, Forrest Whitaker and Isaac de Bancolet are actors who appear in the work. And so we have this great three-way discussion, and it gives them the opportunity, it gives Professor Gillespie the opportunity to talk about his admiration for the film and also specifics as to why he admires the film the way he does. And also it gives Isaac de Bancolet and Forrest Whitaker the opportunity to speak about their interpretations of specific aspects of the film as it played then and as it plays now in 2020. So really interesting insights. I must say also the conversation goes into some interesting avenues of discussion. For example, the idea of language and communication leads to the discussion of topics or discussion or dealings in cinematic terms of themes about immigration and the immigrant experience in the city, in this urban setting. So that is really fascinating. There's also an interesting discussion into perhaps some connections that could be made between this film and another film called The Limits of Control. Also, there are some great concepts about the characterizations and the cross-cultural references that I think speak to a really wonderful universality of the film. And I think this conversation between these three people really helped to illuminate that. These are wonderful comments made by these gentlemen. So this is a highly essential supplement, well worth it. It's one of these situations where it's a recording, I think, through Zoom or some other recording system like that. So it's remote, but I think there's no problem in terms of the editing. I think it's well edited, and there's a smoothness into the way that it flows as a conversation. So well worth it. Once again, 29 minutes, highly engaging conversation between the three gentlemen. Next, we have a 15-minute or so interview or discussion with Ellen Lewis, who was in charge of casting the film. And this is, my understanding is, this is an audio-only discussion. So I don't, I don't recall seeing any actual moving images of Ellen Lewis speaking in an interview, but we hear her comments, and we see. As we hear her comments, we see shots and stills from the various films that she's speaking of, including works by Jarmusch, including, of course, Ghost Dog. And so this gives us a really this gives us an opportunity to hear her experiences in the world of cinema casting. And also we hear about how, for example, she was involved not just with Jarmusch's work, but also some of Scorsese's films. And that gives an interesting opportunity for a discussion about the compare and contrast elements between, say, a Scorsese gangster film and a Jarmusch gangster film. And that's a really interesting conversation. And so that is a great example of why this is so enlightening and illuminating, excuse me. A wonderful conversation to engage with. This is, again, with Ellen Lewis on the casting of the film. And then we have an interesting, approximately 5-minute interview with Shifu Xiangming, and he is the founder and abbot of the USA Shaolin Temple. This is so great because this is an opportunity to hear his comments and to hear the history of the establishment of a USA Shaolin Temple, and also how this aspect, Shaolin Temple, has very direct connections with Jim Jarmusch, with the film Ghost Dog, with the music, RZA, and what that entails and what that speaks to as far as the expression in musical terms and in visual terms, notions of spirituality and this kind of philosophy as embodied by the various characters in the film, and also for the filmmakers in the film as a whole. So this is very fascinating stuff. Again, 5 minutes, so it's well worth checking out if you can. And then the next section of supplements is what's referred to as archival interviews. And if you go in there, there are 2 basic sub-supplements in this section. So the first is described as being from 1999, Jim Jarmusch, Forrest Whitaker, and RZA. And this is in fact, my understanding, this is in fact a approximately 15-minute supplement, which is taking footage of archival interviews with these 3 gentlemen and putting them together in this fashion, combined with clips or stills, which I think was put together by Criterion for purposes of this release. So it's relying on archival interview footage, but it's putting it together or edited in a way that is new for this particular Criterion release. So it's really fascinating to get this. And it's of course, we get the perspective from the musical point of view, which is a key aspect of the character of this film, from the filmmaking point of view in terms of Jarmusch's comments, and also from the acting point of view perspective, which is Forrest Whitaker. So wonderful archival interview compilation, if you will, as presented by Criterion for this release. And then the second of the sub-supplements in this section is the documentary called The Odyssey, A Journey into the Life of a Samurai from 2000. And this is approximately 21 minutes. And this is also a documentary from some years back. And it's relying on, I think, the same session, the interview sessions of these artists, and talking about, again, the background and the genesis of the film, and also the production process and certain artistic choices that were made as described by these artists. So it's archival and it's well worth it. So The Odyssey. Then we have another supplement, which I understand is also something that was based on archival interview footage, but also gathered by the Criterion Collection for purposes of this release. And this is called Flying Birds, the Music of Ghost Dog. 14 minutes. This is, I think, a brilliant supplement because, well, it's relying, as I say, on archival interview footage, specifically of interview with RZA. And this is forming the key, or one of the key components of the power of this film and the success of this film, which is the idea of how music and the score informs not just the environment, but also the spiritual aspects of the character in the film, and also the artistic expression that the artists that were involved were trying to achieve. And so it's integral. It's absolutely essential part of the film. You know, the music is so iconic, and it's reached this iconic status. And in fact, I forgot to mention, of course, you can also get the isolated score as an audio option when you watch the film. But it is brilliant. And in fact, also, Jim Jarmusch makes comment about the availability of certain soundtrack releases when he's talking with respect to a particular question in the Q&A. So please listen to that as well if you're interested. But this is all to say that this is a key character of the film, and it speaks not just to the story, it speaks to the story very well, but also speaks to the spirituality and the spiritual tones of the film, and also this concept of East and West, and the various cultural points that meet and create this sense of universality and accessibility. This is, I think, therefore, it's not just, it creates this wonderful character of the film, but it also creates this great representation of why I think this film is so powerful and so dynamic the way it is. It's almost like the musical encapsulation of those themes and artistic treatments that we see Jarmusch engaged in the cinematic visual medium. So wonderful, and we get the discussions and the reasoning behind the various choices in music. And Flying Birds too. This is also a very interesting concept and scene and image and metaphor that is discussed. So it's a very apt title. So essential, absolutely essential supplement. So this is Flying Birds, the music of Ghost Dog, approximately 14 minutes. And then we have a section which is described as deleted scenes and outtakes. And then we have the trailer. And so that rounds out the supplements found on the disc. But that's not all, because then we also have the booklet, which is found, or booklets. So first we have this booklet, which is a stapled booklet. And as you know, I'm a big fan of the stapled booklets. Maybe it's in the grand scheme of things, maybe it's a relatively minor detail to try to hook onto. But I really believe in the value of the essays. And if we have a stapled booklet, that gives the potential for more essays. And so here we have three writings. We have, of course, the casting credits section, but then we have Ghost Dog as International Sampler by Jonathan Rosenbaum, and By the Book by Greg Tate, and then Variations on a Theme, an interview with Jim Jarmusch, and then information about the transfer and the like. And so these essays and the interview are just spectacular. They are great. I recommend you check them out if you can. I mean, they go in their own ways, for example, into the way that Jarmusch is relying on allusions to literature. They also talk about the film and how it seems to be also an homage and working with different cinematic traditions. There are references made, for example, to Melville and also Seijun Suzuki and the like. And so this and more traditions, I think, are being dealt with by Jarmusch in his cinema. But at the same time, Jarmusch is, as always, forging his own voice and his own path as a cinematic artist. So it's all encompassed into one, and I think the essays touch upon that very nicely, and also and other very key aspects of theme and narrative. So, and a plus perspective from Jarmusch himself. So that's always welcome. It's a wonderful booklet, and I'm glad it's the stapled kind. But that's not all, because then we get this very interesting, very interesting fold out, which is in keeping with one of the themes of the film, which is Hagakure. And this is excerpts from the Book of the Samurai, Hagakure. So we get this fold-out, which is in this wonderful font, and if you note it, it's in keeping with how we see the font and its presentation in various points of the film. So charming, lovely, and very much in the spirit of the film. So it's like the Criterion collection, by including this, is in the physical media way that it deals. It's almost like it's a good faith endeavor to try in physical media form to capture the essence of Ghost Dog, the way of the samurai. So I love it. It's wonderful. So we sometimes see this from Criterion and other releases. So we get these little charming aspects of the physical media release. And so this is one of those examples. So well done, Criterion, for including that. with this release, which is Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.